Hello there. So today in Creatormas 2020 for IMVU, we're continuing our investigation into normal maps for our products. So let me just final check to make sure everything is working as it should be. Looks like it is. Right, so in the last stream, we took a look at making normal maps using 3D and doing something called texture baking. So we are, as the term might imply, baking textures. So we are rendering or converting a high resolution 3D mesh. Let's just hide all of these other ones. So this is a high resolution 3D mesh, just a simple box for now, but the principle applies to everything. And that is, where is it? It's that one. That is rendered down, essentially, or converted, if you like, to an image that's UV mapped to our object. So for that to work, we obviously have to make sure that our object is properly UV unwrapped. Are we in edit mode? Yes, we are. Why is it not allowing me to select something? Because it had the wrong one. There we go. So we have to make sure that our objects are UV mapped, because the UV map is what tells the process what to bake and where. Because obviously each of these, although we've got a cube, each face corresponds to one of our faces on our high resolution. So we just hide that. So there's our high res. So each face has its corresponding face on the high res. So the UV maps themselves determine where or how the high resolution structure is converted and baked down and rendered to our image. So for 3D normal maps, or normal maps baked from 3D, you obviously have to know how to use a 3D application like Blender. Hello, Vatality. Well, it's good software for IMVU, or just good software generally, so haha, welcome to the club. Yes, so to bake 3D based normal maps for your products, you obviously need to know a 3D application like Blender, or 3D Studio Max is the other one. And there are others that you can use for the production of your normal maps, but obviously that then is dependent on your ability to get your low resolution mesh, your low resolution mesh out of the 3D apps that you might be using and into IMVU, which isn't as straightforward as one might think it to be. So if you're not, if the prospect of working with a 3D app is intimidating, there is another way of making them. You're making low poly meshes, Vatality. What are you making them of? So yes, so if there is, if the prospect of using a 3D app is intimidating, there is another way to make your normal maps. So what we'll do first is we'll just reproduce this project, at least the low resolution mesh. Oh, Blender's crashed again. I'm sure it's something to do with something. How's it closed? I think it's something to do with the browsers. Doesn't like them at all. Right, so let's do that again. Open. Right, so if the prospect, as we were saying, of using a 3D app is intimidating, there is another way of doing it, and that's use images to create normal maps. Now, it's not going to produce a normal map that's as good as 3D baking, but for a very particular reason, in that because you're working with 3D, when you bake your normal map, the result is relative to the physical shape of the mesh. So the colors that we see are all relative. So all these colors, so from purple in this corner down to this bluish color down in this corner, all the colors are relative to the 3D structure of the mesh. Now, if we do image-based normal maps, we have to keep in mind that that doesn't work. Whoops. So what we end up doing with 2D normal maps is that we're essentially baking a limited structure. It'll all make sense in a minute. So what we'll do is just create a new project, general, don't save. Right, so we're going to that's quite a lot of stuff you're getting into there. Vitality. Each one of those topics has very particular, you need a very particular set of skills, as what's his face would say. Liam Neeson. Right, so we're going to use the furniture file again. Furniture nodes. Open. And as we did before, we're going to hide the furniture blocks that we don't need and the seating because we don't need those. So outliner, just tick. We don't want the wall, we don't want the ceiling, and we don't want the standing. All we want is the cube. So right now it does have a material. We'll just call this normal map again. 0. And it does have a UV map. So select all. And that is what we have at the moment. But we're going to change the texture. So we can do that two ways. Oh, let's save this before Blender crashes. Save as. Where are we? Normal map. Where is it? There we go. Version 2. Oh no, it's baking. So this is images. Right, so we have a restore point to go back to if Blender decides to crash again. Right, so I'm going to change the image. So we can do that two ways. We can either create an image here and then link that to the shader, we can create a new image here and just link it directly, and then we have to map that to the object. So either or, it doesn't really matter. So let's just do it here. So new normal image 512 by 256. We want color grid. Okay. So it's not appearing on our object yet because the image isn't associated with our material. So shading, block, and scroll down. There is our image, and there it appears on our block. So we just need to check our UV map. Let's redo this. Have we got... Let's go to full screen. Right, so we've got our seams all marked up just for a simple UV map. So select all, unwrap. So we get 6 cubes or squares. And what we want to do hang on a second. So what we want to do with this is use this hold on. Alright, so what we want to do with this, now that we've got our object UV mapped, we want to use this set of UVs as our UV texture map that we're going to use to create our texture that will create into convert into a normal map. So now that we've got that, let's just double check the orientation. So swizzle, so you can use the shortcut keys or the tools. Hold Control to snap. Which way are we on? View, viewpoint, front. So B1. Whoops. A1. Like so. Right, so that's our texture map. That's our object textured. That will be our texture map. So now that we've got all of that done, highlight and then UV, export UV layout, export. So this is UV. We want the faces filled, so fill face opacity 1. We're in the right location. Export. So basically what we're doing in this particular instance is creating a template using the UVs. So let's just save this. Save as to and then what we can do is open up an image editor. It can be anything you want, or anything that obviously you can edit images with. So in this instance, it's this one that shall not be named. but you can be Photoshop, GIMP, Affinity Photo, or any other image editor that will allow you to edit images. So what we want to do is find the UV map that we created. Furniture. And it was a PNG. So where is it? Too many images. Oh, there it is. So that is our texture map. So what we're going to try and do is semi-replicate. Let's just open another instance of Blender and hope that it doesn't crash. Don't need that one, don't need that one. What we're going to do is try and replicate this, or the appearance of this. And we'll see what this looks like a bit later when we put everything together, because we've already got one of these as a project in Studio that we can look at. But what we're going to try and do is create a set of images. Well, we're going to create an image with a set of faces that will hopefully create the impression of rounded corners. So yesterday, or whenever in the last video, if you're working with 3D, your sharp edges are created from your high-resolution 3D geometry. We don't use smoothing, which is why our meshes look mushy like this. So what we're going to try and do is use the same principle, but ordinarily what we would do is mark our edges. Oh, it's crashed again, has it? Yes, it has. Problem is, if I close the browsers, I can't see the chat, so we'll have to put up with Blender crashing all the time. So what we're going to do is create a mesh that is smoothed instead of having these hard edges. So if I just, where is it? Seams. So we've got our sharp edges marked on our cube. So if we do this right, we might be able to get rid of the sharp edges and have our mushy mesh and get the edge definition from our normal maps. It'll all make sense in a minute. Right, so we've got our texture map, we've got our cube UV mapped, everything's okay. So, right, our image. So for image-based normal maps, what we're going to do is make an image that's grayscale. So black represents depth, white represents height. So those are the two extremes, and then all the grey values in between represent different values of height and depth relative to the lowest value that's used and the highest value. So if you just used black and white. So this is one of the things that you have to keep in mind with normal maps. So we could convert this into a normal map, and if black is supposed to be the absolute depth and white the absolute height, you could make an argument, or you would have the expectation that the distance that's generated between these two surfaces, because they're interpreted as surfaces essentially, would be quite extreme. So if we imagine this is our surface plane, so this represents black and white is sat at the top. So if it's the bottom value, so this is the lowest and this is the highest value, this is where the white plane is, we might expect that there'd be quite a distance between the two surfaces, or the two tones or colours, and that would be represented in the normal map. So we would have quite a significant difference in tonal value or colour between this surface and this surface. Doesn't work like that. The colour or the tones are relative to each other. So even though, I mean, in this example we've got the extreme of black and the extreme of white, the difference isn't interpreted that extreme. So it only looks like a small step. So if you want a larger, or the appearance of a larger structure in your normal map, you might have to then start thinking about playing around with 3D geometry. So there is a way of using 3D and image-based normal maps. So if you weren't comfortable with doing high resolution meshes, you could still make a low resolution mesh with an image-based normal map and make that work the way that you might want it to. So what you could do is create your normal map from your image per what we've got here, and then in your object you would actually build a structure that would look like that. So we would actually have actual height in this section. So you could use a normal map to do that based on an image. Right, so what we're going to do then, we have to think that, so we need rounded corners, so that will likely mean that we need to do some grayscale, some blurring. So yoink. Oh, that's a solid. Is that solid? Background. Right, so let's blur that a little bit, because that will give us, relatively speaking, a ramp or curved, the impression of a curved surface. So Gaussian blur, it's too much, way too much. Okay. And let's do whoops. I need that to be solid. So make that a grey. Drop that under our edge. So keeping in mind what we were talking about, so we've got a light or slight transition from, at the moment it's white, to this grey colour, but we need to create the impression of depth rather than height. So what this will do is, when we convert this, if we converted this, so if this is our surface plane, what we want at the edge is for it to appear to curve around like this. But because we've got white in place, it'll curve up, or it'll give the impression of a raised surface. So what we can do is select that and just paint it. We don't need to go black, but we'll just leave it like that for now. And then what we'll do is copy that. So select them both, group, duplicate, move that across. What we do have to watch out for, hide that, make sure our edges are tidy. Oops. Get rid of those bits. That looks a little darker. Very weird. Okay, well, let's work with that. So duplicate. So we are filling our UVs and if we want, we can put some, can't see that text in here. So that we have a brighter colour. Whoops. Can't see the arrows. Oh, there we go. So let's do 50%. Yeah. So we'll leave the text white as a contrast comparison. So let's just save this, save as. Save. Flatten. Whoops. Flatten. Export. Or save as. PNG. So avoid using JPEG for what we're about to do, because it introduces compression artifacts that can mess up the normal map. So PNG. That's all right. Okay. So what we need to do next, this is our grayscale image. What we're going to do next is convert this into a normal map. And for that, we can either use something like GIMP, which has its own normal map converter or filter. So GIMP is free, so if you don't have an image editor, It's open source, so you can download that from, I think it's, is it? Let me just double check the URL for that. Yes, it is gimp.org. So GIMP.org, and you can go and download that. It's a very good app for what it is. Right, so I'm going to open our grayscale image. Yoink. So that is it. What we're then going to do is zoom into this, so control middle mouse up. What we're then going to do is filters, generic, normal map. And that, whoops, opens up this little filter dialog. And as soon as it does, it also converts our normal map, converts our image into a normal map. And we can already see that the way that we did the edges has created this impression that we are looking at, looks like bathroom tiles basically. And obviously our text has gone all coloured and funky. So let's just scale this down a little bit. Let's try 3. That's all right. Opacity, that's all right. Then OK. That is our normal map that's created from an image. So let's just save this locally. Save as. That's all right. Save. And then export. Again, PNG. It's going to be important really for IMVU. It's going to be important for normal maps for IMVU to use PNG images. That's all right. Export. Oh no. Oh. Cancel. I want that to be -normal. And that's all right. Export. So that's our normal map created from an image. Obviously, depending on what it is that you're doing, I mean, in GIMP, we've got all sorts of things that you can do. Whoops. All sorts of things you can do to your image in terms of what your normal map is of. So even things like lace. So if you were making clothing items, fabric patterns, lace, all sorts of things, you can convert those into a normal map. Obviously, you have to be mindful of the resolution of your image relative to what you are trying to create, and or whether you're then going to use opacity maps with your normal maps, because that again introduces another thing to the whole equation. But that is our normal map. So let's drop this onto our material. So we're just going to create another slot, connect color to normal. I'm just going to load in the normal map so that we can see what it looks like in Blender. Where is it? What did we call it? Normal image. Oh, there it is. Open. So for this to work in Blender, this is just a preview, so this gives us an idea of what we're working with in IMVU Studio. So we want to make sure that in the normal map image channel, we want to convert or change the color space to non-color. And that'll switch it over to using our normal map as a normal map. Where's the text gone? Oh, there it is on the top there. So there we go. And it has, so let's just, did we get rid of this? No, we haven't yet. So, yoink. Don't you dare freeze up on me again. So let's just save that quickly. Number 3. So we can just about see, because of the shininess that's assigned to the material, we can see the text just about. But what we want to do, so we need to get rid of edit mode, select all. So it'll be interesting to see what this does. So edge, clear sharp. So it makes our mesh go mushy. Oh, I see. It does work. It's not quite as good as the 3D version, but very nice. Let's double check. That's annoying that it keeps doing that. And that I have to keep checking the settings because Blender doesn't save them. So that is that's interesting. Okay, I wasn't expecting that actually, to be honest, because most of my normal maps are created from 3D images, from 3D meshes. When we're doing objects, at least, the best approach is to use 3D meshes. But if you don't have access to that, obviously, or if it's intimidating, blah 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 blah, you'd use images. But I wasn't expecting it to work quite as well as that. So that is our object normal mapped using an image-based normal map. So let's save this and export this to IMVU. So mesh root node. Oh, let's just double check, make sure our thing is set up. That's all right. So the mesh vertex groups. That's all right. Root. 2 objects are parented. So file export FBX. That's all right. Right, so selected objects, checkbox, everything else is okay. Geometry, apply modifiers, that's all right. So leave that checkbox there. Armatures, always disable, add leaf bones, so deselect. We don't need any animation, so deselect. And then export. Right, so that's step 1. Got all our normal maps sorted out. So next, we have to do our doohickey in Studio. So this is Studio, if you're not familiar with it. When you first open it, you see all your local projects that you've been saving on your file, on your computer, the things that you've been working on and saved locally. You've got all your recent. Why is it showing these old meshes? These are old. It should be showing all your submitted. Not quite sure why it's showing all these old meshes, but it shows you your submitted meshes, anything that's in peer review, and then obviously the published. So what's the difference between submitted and published? Are these things that are submitted but are hidden? I guess that's what that is. Anywho. So these are all our submitted meshes. They don't particularly seem to appear in any particular order that's relative to their creation date by the looks of things, but by the by. So to create, click the button, create. We get all these meshes. Anything that appears in here, you'll be able to derive from. And we want furniture, so rooms and furniture, furniture. Hello, rooms and furniture, furniture. There we go. So we want the empty furniture. Derive, down at the bottom here. Whoops. So there's nothing in the scene. So we're going to import our FBX. So hamburger, edit, import. It'll bring up the file browser. So we now need to browse to our FBX. Where is our FBX? Oh, it's messed up the group by type. Which one are we? Normal images 3, that one. Select. So it opens up the... Oh dear, it better not be doing what it's going to do. It was working so well yesterday. Or when it was the day before, in the last video. Double check. Twitch normal images 2. So blah blah. That's right. File, export, FBX. Twitch normal maps images. That's okay. Yep. Edit, import. Twitch normal images 3, that's the one we want. Okay, poop to you too. So let's try import the one we created in the previous video. See, that works. Okay. That's very odd. Okay, so let's do a little playing around in Blender. So what we can do, that's most annoying. It might just be because it's such a simple mesh, although I can't see why it would cause problems. Material setup, shading setup. Oh, you know what it might be. So let's decouple the normal map from our material. Although this shouldn't be a problem. Let's try re-exporting that, because that's the only difference from previous exercise. So FBX. That's alright, that's alright, that's alright. Export. Nope, it's not that. Right, let's close that. So what we can do is, once we've got a normal map, depending on the type of object that you've got, we'll just do a little bit of editing and creating a bit more of a complex mesh, because it might be that that's causing issues. It shouldn't, but it might. Oh, it might be. We don't need that, so let's get rid of that. Let's try that again, actually. Just one more time. So these are the things that you have to do to double check that you are exporting a valid FBX file. because it doesn't always work straight away. It works fine. Whoops. It worked fine yesterday or the day before. But as you can see, it's not as quick as classic, so that's something that just going to have to get used to because of the way that it works now. Everything that you submit has to be verified and double checked and something or other. Which means it's sending data back and forth between your client and IMVU. Now, of course, it's IMVU. So the preview, it increments. So as it's previewing the file, that becomes more yellow, the entire button. So the fact that it's doing that means it's broken or it's not working properly. So let's try that again. So all you creators complaining about IMVU Studio being buggy, duh, of course it is. Right. One more time. And of course it has to be slow today. Uh-oh. Somebody's in for a copyright infringement claim. Just don't do that. Seriously. Yeah, well done. A genius idea. Right, so empty furniture, derive. Let's try it one more time. Twitch normal images. Yeah, it doesn't like that for some reason. No idea why. Right, well, we'll do a bit of editing on the mesh then. So, depending on your normal map, so for a simple box like this, although the normal map is... Let's put the normal map back in place. Yoink. In fact, let's make a specular as well. So let's think. So our shininess is similar to the normal map, in that the shininess is determined by the color value or the tonal value. So white is super duper shiny, black is matte, and your grayscale values are varying degrees of shininess from black to white. So let's do some very quick shiny highlights on the edges. Oops. Let's blur that by a big value. That's too big. That'll do. So we don't want the black corners or the darker corners. Oh, we missed one. Looks like a blurry digital LED. That's 888. Let's make... In fact, actually, we probably don't need to. So what we can do... Yeah, that'll do. This will show what we need to do for our shininess map. So, File, Save As. I'll make these files available as well for playing around with. Flatten. Save As. PNG. So we don't have to worry about this white bit because that's not on any of the UV maps. That's not any, none of the UV map sections are on that. Right, so there is our material so far. So let's just drop another image texture in. Connect color to, where is it, specular. And then load in our image. There it is. So that creates our shininess. And so this approximates what we're going to see, or what we should have seen, in Studio. So we've got really shiny highlights at the edges and very matte reflection or shininess in the center. And our text is nice and shiny. Oh, I know what was causing the problem. Dagnabbit. Okay, so what we need to do, let's just grab this. So copy. Open recent. Let's just give this a color. Drop that on place. There we go, that'll do. Let's call this diffuse. Flatten. Save as. PNG. That's all right. So what we're going to do, no, don't need to do that, it's the file icon. What we're going to do is replace the problem. Should have thought about this. Problem is IMVU doesn't like generated images. So I suspect that that may be the problem with the import. So we'll use that. So we've replaced the generated image. It's a procedurally generated image that Blender creates in order to build the material. So this is our basic material in Blender. So that's what we've got in Blender. Don't need the normal map or the specular map, but if you do connect all of this stuff up together, it won't bring in this, the normal map, but it will assemble both the diffuse and the specular. So you can assemble your materials in Blender like this, and they will be interpreted correctly by Studio. So that's our material. So let's just quickly save this. Save as. And let's try exporting that now. So layout, mesh, root, export, FBX, number 4. So selected objects, geometry, that's alright, armature, always disable, don't need animation, so that's alright, so export. So let's see if this works. So let's just close that. So IMVU is clean, has no cached data saved in it. So create. Rooms and furniture. Furniture. Empty. Derive. Cardboard preview. This is the one thing that is going to be the biggest challenge, the biggest issue that IMVU have to fix is this delay, this waiting for all of this interface to appear. Because it's the more projects you have loaded, the more projects you have saved, and the more projects it opens, the longer it takes. So it's listing everything that you might have. I don't know if it lists all your projects, but as you can see, we're just scrolling down and it's showing everything. So it must be listing all the files that you have in your account. So I would imagine people with thousands of products are going to have a hard time working with IMVU Studio. So they're going to need to sort that out pronto, because this delay switches people off. Right, so let's try that again. So furniture, blah de blah, blah de blah. And it's stuck. Maybe someone else is using IMVU Studio. Let's close that. That one other person. Okay, so create. Rooms of furniture. Furniture. La 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 la. Empty furniture. Click. Derive. There we go. What is that? 20th time lucky? Just to test a simple mesh. See, this is the frustrating bit, is it's all very well having this verification system in place, right? So if at the point that you've assembled your final product and all your assets are together and everything's working and it's supposed to, it looks the way that you're doing, it looks the way that you're expecting it to look, yes, then you can verify all the assets. But doing that every time that you have to, every time you make a simple change, a minor change, an insignificant change, every time you have to, if you want to check what you've done, check the progress, check to make sure that something's working right, check to make sure that the image is appearing on the UV correctly, check that the UV on the mesh is working properly. You have to wait for it to do what it needs to do. That's immensely frustrating because it's the amount of time that's wasted just sitting, waiting for the application to do what it needs to do. You know, and I get, as creators, we understand that there needs to be some sort of verification system in place that helps prevent all the thievery that goes on. But not doing something like this, it just means that it's just going to turn people off. People are just not going to bother using the application at all because of the amount of time it takes for you to do anything. Rant over. Right, Twitch normal images 4. Let's see if this works. Yes, of course. Why didn't I think of that before? So, if you are working with your images, I don't know if this is applicable to 3D Studio Max or any other application, but if you are assigning generated images to your meshes as you work on them, so you are creating, what would they be, temporary placeholder images or proxy images, that ordinarily you could you can save the project out as we did. It'll save them out and it'll have a proxy reference file path to the generated image, which you obviously replace. But if you then import a mesh that has something like that in place, it bulks at import because IMVU is obviously trying to read Studio, I should say. Doesn't do this with Classic. Studio is trying to read the material assignments that are assigned to the FBX. So it's trying to read the data. And if it comes across a file path that references a temporarily created image and it follows that pathway to a dead end, essentially, it locks up. It doesn't have a system in place to just replace it with a placeholder, a temporary file, as it does with Classic. If you import the FBX into Classic and it can't find the texture, it'll just replace it with a checker. Studio doesn't have that, so you have to be aware of that when you are working with your meshes. So if you're creating something and it's got a temporary texture assigned, make sure you assign an actual image to your object and the material, because IMVU is clever enough, the program is clever enough to interpret your material in a way that it can assemble in Classic or Studio. So now that we've got the FBX loaded, so FBX, so it's got one skeleton, which is the root node, one mesh, and our material, no animation. So set up FBX, change the scale 0.01, 2 bones, one mesh. So we've actually only got one bone. We talked about this in the last video. We've only actually got one bone, which is the node, the root node, with the mesh attached to it. But FBX considers all objects within the file to be a bone or a member of the skeletal hierarchy. So it's actually showing 2 bones. So this is bone 1 and this is bone 2, because it's actually looking at a hierarchy, not an actual skeleton. I mean, obviously a skeleton is a hierarchy, but for FBX purposes, it's looking at everything that's in the file in order for it to create a hierarchy. So this can be confusing sometimes when you're expecting this to just say one bone and one mesh. Right, so it's got our mesh. Next, it's got our... Oh, it hasn't brought in this, the specular map for all of that. Normally does. Unless that's Classic. Classic does that. Right, so normal map. Next. That's the diffuse, by the way. So that's just the diffuse. So we've got, I think, diffuse, opacity, normal map, specular. And you can click on these. So what did we have? We had a normal map. So we can click on these. Won't add the normal map, but I'll add this specular. So where is that? Lots of images. Where is that? Oh, there it is. Right, so I'll add that. So that's our specular. I'll add the normal map once we get this imported. But you can add your images by clicking on these little wireframe boxes. Next, no animation, preview or review. That's all right. Import. And it's going to do its preview thing. And there is our box. And you can see we've got our shininess attached to it. So the box is shiny. So the white bits of our shininess map are very shiny. And we can adjust the value of that, or the hardness, how bright it looks, by changing reflectivity. So now that's not quite as bright. So this highlight here, let's crank that all the way up, 100. So now that highlight is blinding. So that's the shininess, but let's add our normal map. So component, got materials, meshes, skeletons, actions. We obviously want material, so we select our material. And then we've got our properties. So diffuse, that's the blue. Opacity, we don't have an opacity. We haven't got the normal map in, but we have the shininess in. So we click on the box, click on Add Image. Scroll to our normal map. That's that one. Open, and then click Preview. It resets the view, but we now have a normal map assigned to our object. Did we do sharp edges on this? Thought we disabled that. Yes, we did. Okay. So our box has sharp edges. Let me just double check that. So, okay, right, so what I'm going to do is just duplicate this, use the same material. Oh, don't crash on me. Ah, it's crashed. Let's close a few things because we don't need them anymore. Right, so select our cube, duplicate, just move that across. So that, because it's a duplication of the original, oh, I've no idea what's causing this, but Blender is being very buggy recently. This is Blender 2.83 LTS, by the way. So that's long-term support. Let me just save this file. Save as. Let's try closing this. Right, so duplicate. All we're going to do is create a version without smoothing, without sharp edges, and one with sharp edges. So edit mode. Oh, seriously? I'm going to have to close the browsers. So if you enter a question, I will not see it. Oh, speaking of which, hi Tina and hi Golden Love on YouTube. But bye for now, because I can't see your comments now. Let me see if I can get them open on YubChub. What did I open? Need some incidental music for technical issues. We are currently experiencing technical issues. We will be with you momentarily. let's try that again. So yoink. Just going to save. Right, so edit, sharp edges. So let's just hide. Whoops, no, that's the wrong one. So we've got our sharp edges on that mesh, but not on the other one. But we need the modifier and or. So you can either use the modifier for this, or you can use, where is it? Normals. It kind of does the same thing. It just, you have slightly more control over your edge splits or the hard edges that appear on your mesh if you use sharp edges and the modifier versus just using the angle of normals. Right, so we can see that we have a sharply defined edged cube and a mushy defined cube. So both of them are controlled by the same thing, so that's alright. Let's just save that and export. So 2 meshes, 1 root, which sounds suspiciously like something that should not be mentioned. Export FBX number 4. So selected objects, that's alright. Disable, disable. Export. Right, so let's try getting that into Studio. See what difference that makes. Create. Rooms and furniture. Furniture. Empty furniture. Derive. So again, remember that one cube has sharp edges, the other one doesn't. So 1 skeleton, 2 meshes, 1 material, 0.01. And again, so we've got 3 bones this time and 2 meshes, again because each mesh is considered a bone within the hierarchy of the FBX. So block floor, that's alright. Normal map. Import. So there are our objects. So let me just add okay, so using this solid color, it's slightly easier to see. So we have our mesh that's got the hard edges and our other mesh, which is all, it doesn't, it's all soft, it's all the same smooth group. So what we can do with this is add our normal map, and we can see how the mesh behaves with respect to sharp edges on our mesh. There's the box. We'll leave this flat color in for now. So there is our normal map, and it kind of works. So it is creating a sharp edge, but not quite the same way that the, let's drop in the shininess. So there's our shininess. So we can see that the box does have sharpish edges. So without the normal map, we can see how, oops, let's just get rid of the shading as well, the shininess. We can see how the smoothing, well, particularly on this leading edge, we can see how the smoothing changes. It changes color slightly as this edge or face is defined or detached relative to this face and this face at the top. Whereas our other one, although we can't really see it too clearly, isn't doing that. It's all one shading group. So we can see we've got a clean edge here, a lighter colour at the top, darker colour down the back, whereas we haven't got that with our other object because it's darker on the top there where it shouldn't be because it's all one group. So when we add the normal map, it's creating some sharper edges. It's not as good as the 3D version, but it looks like if you use images, so this will be a bit of experimentation. If you use images to create your normal maps, you might be able to get away with actually leaving your sharp edges in place. Whereas if you create a normal map from a 3D object, you can't do that. Home, which is this one. Hi Venoms. Not sure why the chat thing is not working. Hang on. Right, so yes, you want to watch out for, it's that one I think. No, it's not that one. Where's the other one gone? Oh, there we go. Too many derivations created. So if you want to get rid of one of these things that you've derived, click on the three dots and then click delete. Oops, no, it's the wrong one. Delete. That gets rid of it, and again you have to wait for the thing to update itself. So delete. What we want is Prezi box. So edit. Yes, so if you're doing a 3D normal map, you want your edges to be defined by the normal map of the the mesh, the normal map that's generated by the mesh. Don't use sharp edges because it breaks the normal map. So it creates the inverse problem. So if we look at these, this is the mushy one, and this is the one with the sharp edges. So the correlation is, get rid of that one. So this is our mushy one, and this is the one with sharp edges. But this one looks slightly better than this one as a 2D, when using 2D normal maps, versus this one, where we have this one looks better than this one using a 3D based normal map. So it might take a bit of playing around with your normal maps if you make them from images. It might take a bit of playing around to with the use of sharp edges. But anyway, once you've got all of this, so that's working. So let's just save that. File, save as. So this is Twitch. Hang on, I'm just seeing. I've opened the thingy on the blue on the mobile. Golden. I wanted to start making some assets and learn some additional cash. Well, yes, she's asking if, so the Creator program, you can earn money from it, but don't necessarily expect to be earning tons of cash right away. It takes a while to build it because you're basically building up essentially it's a micro business, so you have to build up the micro business in order to make it profitable. So if you make the right kind of products, you're obviously going to make more cash than you would do if you're just making stuff for yourself that you just hope to sell. So if you're doing it from the point of view of trying to earn some revenue, you have to think about it in a slightly different way. That is that you are running a micro business basically. It's not just something that you are doing to learn 3D. You're learning 3D to help run a business essentially. But you can, don't worry about the duplicated comment. So you can earn, but it may take a while, particularly these days because there's so many items in the catalogue. That's just answering your question. But anyway, so once you've got your normal map sorted out, so let's put our, did we? Right, so that is in place. You can do what we were doing previously where you can duplicate, do some basic shape changing and play around with your object, but you won't necessarily break the normal map because the normal map is relative to your UVs and how those are relative to the object. So you have a certain degree of latitude to play around with your shapes once you've got them textured. So, I mean, obviously you don't want to go too crazy, but so we've got a rather battered box. Like so. Let's just save this. Don't want Blender crashing on me again. Yes, my store is JazzCat. And it is, if you want to get into it for the sake of just getting into it and learning some skills. So some 3D texturing. A lot of people do it, particularly the clothing creators. They get into it because they're interested in fashion, not that they're necessarily interested in IMVU or creating per se, but they use it as a means of realizing their fashion clothing design ideas. So you'll find quite a few people that are into it for that. So, but they don't necessarily do it for the sake of earning revenue. They just happen to earn revenue as a result of what they do. So we've got our boxes. So once you've got your box, in this case, or your original object, you can then do all sorts of things with it and keep the normal map in, what's the word? The integrity of the normal map is kept. So again, so let's just duplicate, not duplicate, so let's save, export. So we saved that, export, it's number 5, so export, FBX, and it's the browsers, something to do with the browsers are causing Blender to crash. So 5. Uh, 555. So export. That's okay. That's all right. All right. All right. So let's do another one. Create. Empty furniture. Derive. But yes, it's worth doing just for the sake of doing it and learning some new skills. I mean, if you're into just painting and creating textures and images anyway, it's a good outlet for number 5. It's a good outlet for what's the word? Retasking those assets into something else. So you're transforming or transmogrifying those into something else. So import 0.01 again. So we've got 3 meshes along with our root bone or root node. So we now got 4 bones and 3 meshes. That's all right. Next. That's all right. Next. View. Import. So there is our box. Let's assign the normal map. And then the specular or shininess. Preview those. And there is our mushed up box with our normal maps. Doesn't look too shabby actually. So that, let's save that. File, save as. So that is creating a product, simple as it is, with a normal map and shininess map that's based on images rather than 3D. So that's images and that's 3D. The 3D version has more fidelity, but as we said at the beginning, to do that you have to wrestle with actually 3D meshing and modeling, which obviously is not everyone's cup of tea. But with with images you can still get a decent looking product with normals created from an image. And to answer your question, Golden, it depends. Most people just earn, the average I think is less than $50 a month. Hi DJO Joe. Most people just earn as little as $50 a month. You'd be lucky if you get that, but the top creators, they earn thousands of dollars a month. They've been at it for years, and they have an established stable of products in their catalogue, an established customer base, all sorts of things. You know, people follow them on Twitter and on the social medias and all that sort of stuff. So they're well established, and it takes a lot of time, effort, and energy and expense to actually earn that kind of money. But it is possible. The top earners do earn quite a bit of money. But most people just, it's, you know, it's, what's the word? Pocket change, pocket money, extra money. So it's nothing that will necessarily pay the bills, if that's what you're thinking of, unless you put a lot of effort in. Oh yes, this is, so Gold's asking if this is the IMVU Studio beta. Yes, it is. Classic is this one. Oh, it's a good job, yeah. Oh yes, well, yeah, additional pocket money will be fine. It may take a while to build up to earning that kind of cash, but whoops. One thing to note that is quite important, and I mentioned this in the previous video, if you do make products with Studio, they will open in IMVU Classic, but they won't look quite the same, particularly because of the way that smoothing and sharp edges work on meshes in Classic. So if you are creating your products using normal maps, to get the best from normal maps, it's likely that you are going to be using the normal maps to create your edges, your edge geometry essentially, versus the sharp, so we're splitting the actual mesh itself to do this. With normal maps, that's okay. Without, it's not. So if you open these types of meshes in Classic, they will look all mushy and horrible. So that's something to keep in mind if you are going to work with Studio, that you are basically working with Studio and that's it. The products will be backward compatible, you will be able to open them, but they're not going to look quite as good as you expect them to. So keep that in mind. Do you have to work with Blender 2.7 or 2.9? I would work with, it's suggested that you work with Blender 2.83 LTS. You can use the new ones. the newer versions, but the problem with those is that they are constantly changing things. So you may be working on a project and find that it doesn't open or work properly in a later version. LTS is short for long-term support, and that is feature locked. It's feature locked for about another year, I think. So they're not going to do anything that will necessarily break it. So if you're making products for IMVU, you're best off using 2.8 LTS. And that just then means you're using FBX as your export format. Oh, I know what we didn't do. So let's add a light. Let's see how image-based normal maps behave with respect to the light. So there we go. There's our light source. Again, I'll make all these source files available for download so that you can play around with them and see the effects for yourself. Is that normal map upside down? I think that normal map is upside down. So that's our light source. Just notice that. It doesn't do it with an... I don't think it does it with the... the example files, they're all available for the older versions and the newer versions. Yes, so the light source is here. So that's obviously the direction of the light, but we've got, if we look at the up, whoops, we've got shadow at the bottom, which is towards the light, but we've got the highlight at the top, which is obviously away from the light. So this should be shadow and this should be highlight. So it means our normal map is upside down. So image editor, what you want golden are, let me just bring up the how do you get to oh, there we go. Just finding some links for you. How to yeah, hang on a second, I'll find you a link. Right, so you want these. Well, have a look at those. I'll just drop these in the other chat as well. But what you want are the starter files. Yeah, so what you want is the starter files. There's different types, different starter files for different types of products. So for you, it'll be the furniture starter files. Don't let the older creators hear you saying that. So Golden is saying that the new studio is much cleaner and better. So stick that in your eye, old creators. Right, so what were we doing? Oh, the normal map. So this is one thing we might have to watch out for with normal maps. We have to swizzle. So if that's that, so we need to just need to look at the channels. And it usually is the green one. Yes, so split your channels, or not split, investigate your, or expose the channels. And what you need to do is select the green one. And depending on what application you're doing, using, it'll differ how this is done. So we're just inverting that. So if I just undo, redo. So that's changed the tonal orientation, or it's inverted the green channel. So if I now save that, save as, let's just do this as a different version, normal 2. Yes, well that's why they're updating it, because they're all switched. It's IMVU's focus now is on our IMVU's focus is now on mobile. So most of their customers, most of the people that use it are now on mobile platforms. So I think it's something like 80% of people that use it are on mobile. So let's save that. So we can see that the shading is darker at the bottom there. It should be lighter there. So this should, let's close that. Material, inspector, add image, will load in the second normal map, wherever that is. There it is. Open. So it's not going to preview it, so I'll click preview. So keep an eye on this. Oh, and of course it resets the view. And now we've duplicated our object. And now that's set up the shadows correctly. So now, where's the light source gone? Where's the ball? Is that the ball? That can't be the ball. Oh, so that's what it's doing. That's weird. Yes, it's worth doing now, just for the sake of, you know. So those, yes, so the normal map's flipped upside down. But that is our image-based normal map. Phew, that was a bit of a... Close that. So I wonder if the The 3D baked version isn't like that though, which is a bit weird. Have to look into that. But anyway, so that is the source files that they use are actually the ones that I created, funnily enough. So if you click the link that's posted in chat, you'll be using the latest versions, the most up-to-date versions that won't be available from IMVU actually. But they will be updated for Blender 2.8 and above, and you will be able to open them in Blender 2.90, but as suggested, you want to be using 2.83 LTS, because that's not going to cause as many problems as using the newest bleeding edge version. Right, so that's the two main ways of creating normal maps. Baking them from 3D images, baking them from 3D meshes and creating 2D images from that 3D mesh, and converting a 2D image into a normal map. What you don't want to be doing, this is an aside, what you don't want to do is just pass a photograph or an image through the filter and convert it to a normal map, because that won't work. You'll get a normal map out the end, but it won't be optimized as relative to what a normal map is doing, because the conversion process it will be interpreting shadow and shading. So if you were taking a picture of a brick wall, for example, the shadows and the shading underneath the brick that gives it the impression of being 3D to us as we look at something will be interpreted as depth for the normal map, and the highlight at the top of the brick will be interpreted as height. So you'll get a funny, your brick wall will look rather odd with that kind of normal map in place. So if you're going to use a photograph, you're going to have to do a bit of prep work to make sure that you're using the right tonal values with respect to what the normal map is expecting, not what is shown in the image. But yes, so I'll pack these up, add these to the zip file that's already available from previous stream with our 3D meshes, and then we can have a play with those. I'll include the FBX and the blend file. Oh, there isn't a blend file for this, but the PSDs, so that you can open those and look at them yourself, and upload them into Studio and see how it all fits together. Right. On that note, I think we'll call it quits there, because we've been going almost 2 hours. And we shall see you on the next stream, which may be just making a simple product that uses normal maps and shininess maps. I'm not quite sure what yet, but we'll do that in the next stream. We'll actually make something and put all of this into practice. Make a product. Right. We shall see you then. And thanks for hanging out, everyone. So, Vitality, Venoms on Twitch, Golden on YouTube, Joe, Tina, and all the lurkers lurking. And obviously don't forget to like, subscribe, and do the usual stuff. And we shall see you on the next stream. So, bye for now, everyone.